Hi, Mystery Writers. Welcome to the Mystery Writers Studio. I'm Zara Altair, and today I want to talk about how you can use your detective sleuth's character traits to set up the obstacles in your story. It makes things a lot easy. It makes things really a lot easier. Um, because what you're doing is you're challenging your sleuth's actual traits. So, sleuth protagonists in a traditional mystery may not have a character arc per se. So, unlike many genres, hold on, I'm turning off my notices there. Um, Unlike many genres, your sleuth does not need to learn a lesson as the story progresses. They don't have that character arc where they learn something and they're totally changed at the end, all right? But you can deepen the character and make events in the story feel emotionally challenging by matching the character traits and the obstacles opposite to the trait to elicit an understanding of your character for your reader. This really gets your readers emotionally involved with your character, which of course gets them to care about your story, all right? Um, as a matter of fact, the first lesson in my course, Write a Killer Mystery, approaches detailing your novel's detective, and you establish your sleuth's character traits. And of course, one of your sleuth's traits is their ability to solve a crime. And we're going to have a lot of trouble with that as the story progresses. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a story, right? So, as you put together your protagonist's strengths and weaknesses, you are also setting up ways to challenge your sleuth by playing off those strengths and weaknesses. So, when when you want to have obstacles and you're ramping up the tension as the novel progresses, you can look to those traits to find ways to make it more difficult for your sleuth. So, first of all, while you're designing your character background and you're listing out their traits, just find the opposite of each of those traits and make that part of your character background. This is going to make it a lot easier to think of things as you're writing your story. So, in order to set up challenges for your sleuth that feel integral to your story, that's so important. You can't just have another big obstacle drops out of the sky. You really want it to feel like it's part of the story. Um, you want to create problems that play off both the strengths and weaknesses of that main character. Even with strengths, you can have too much of a good thing, right? And in the wrong situation, especially. And you can expose weaknesses as you create opposition through setting and other characters. So let's look at some examples of opposites. Their strength is critical thinking. That's a good thing for a detective to have. And their opposite is overthinking when it's time for action. Right? And a weakness might be a soft spot for kids and kittens or whatever. And the opposite is uh, is dealing with a kid that lies. With charm, of course, but the kid is lying. All right. And so they miss the lies. Um, Strength might be their physical strength. All right. But the opposite is going to be they're like a bull in a china shop with their approach to crime. They really don't think about things and they just barrel on in when it's not appropriate. All right. But anyway, you get the idea. So when you're setting up your character traits, be sure to set up the opposites as well because that's going to give you so many opportunities to create obstacles in your story without having to bring something in from the sky in order to make it difficult for your sleuth to solve the crime. Um, so, really, brainstorming traditional novel obstacles, all those things that keep your detective from getting where they want to be and solving the crime. Really try this character trait opposition to create story conflicts that are integral to your story and your sleuth. And even if the plans turn out to be wrong, even if their sleuth plans turn out to be wrong, um, as your sleuth solves the crime, they create plans and goals for reaching their objectives. So let's look at some ways to use traditional storytelling obstacles and match them up with your sleuth strengths and weaknesses. So I really, really have to know your sleuth inside and out. And I remember one time one of my editors said, I think your sleuth should say this at a point in the story. And I said, this character would never say that, ever. And you have to know your sleuth that well to know that this suggested edit isn't going to work in your story. There's lots of reasons to know your sleuth inside and out. All right. So, anyway, let's get back to all this. All right. So, intellectual obstacles are part and parcel of challenging your sleuth's critical thinking skills, and your sleuth must discern the false clues from the actual evidence, and they need to sort through the information from suspects, often hidden by lies and misdirections that those suspects set up. So, if you have a smart sleuth, for instance, think of ways that seem plausible and logical that lead your sleuth in the wrong direction. They come up with the wrong conclusion about something. And these result in disappointment and frustration. And then, as an example of physical, if your sleuth hates the heat and doesn't function well, crank up the temperature. It's that simple. They're really uncomfortable in the heat and don't do well, and you can crank up the temperature. Or if your sleuth is diminutive and uses their thinking skills, match them with a locked door they must enter. All right. But the idea is to find a physical challenge that impacts your sleuth physical limitations. All right, and there's lots of ways to think about this. So there's also social. Whatever your sleuth's social background, pit them against someone from another social strata. And your sleuth will need to deal with the other characters' misperceptions of who they are, who the sleuth is, all right? And vice versa, your sleuth has to overcome um, uncomfortable surroundings with character that is from a different social class, like dealing with the very poor, or they may feel resentment when confronted by people with power. It just, whatever those your social backgrounds, you can put them in a situation that is different than their regular social background. All right. And then emotional. Emotional challenges create powerful connections with your readers. So pit your sleuth's emotional challenges against not only their external goals, solving the crime, finding the villain, but their uncertainties and their foibles and personal interactions with friends and peers. So, for example, does your sleuth shy away from emotional engagements and commitment, and they're commitment reluctant? But then they meet someone they like, right? And do they mess it up to keep from being committed? Or if they're afraid of heights, do you put them on top of a tower chasing the villain? Just think of all these emotional challenges that you can use to make things difficult for your sleuth. And then one other thing that I like to work with a lot is political. So even if your sleuth believes they are apolitical, politics impacts their investigation. It doesn't matter whether they're a law enforcement um, officer or um, what's the word? I'm blanking the word at the moment. Anyway, like just a regular citizen, a cozy mystery sleuth who just decides to take on an investigation. Um, so it could be internal politics in the law enforcement agency, to powers that be intruding on the investigation of your regular citizen sleuth, and they challenge your sleuth with their power politics. So I just want to emphasize why matching the challenges to the traits works. It just works so well. When you take the character based approach to creating challenges for your mystery sleuth, you deepen the character and you build reader connection with your protagonist. So, challenges matched to your sleuth's character traits imply it's an organic feeling to the storyline. Nothing feels imposed. It doesn't feel like you worked hard to create this situation, which in actuality is a situation that just reflects one of your sleuth strengths or weaknesses. So rather than just, making a list of challenges that could happen, right, and simply creating those new challenges, you create obstacles based on your character's personality. And the conflicts feel personal to your reader who is rooting for your sleuth, right? They care, right? And it builds up that caring. And so the twists that lead your detective in a new direction or temporarily lock them sideways become integral to understanding the character. And when you're stuck for a new twist, you can look for a character trait and brainstorm a conflict that opposes one of your character's traits. All right, I hope that helps. I think if you do this front work with your character development and do the traits and their opposites, you're going to find it much easier to come up with situations where your sleuth is confounded and they meet obstacles either in personalities that they meet as suspects, um, or in their personal lives as they're dealing with a mentor or love interest or sidekick. So, all these things can create obstacles in your story that build the tension and give your sleuth lots of trouble, which is what we want to do when we're creating that story. All right, thank you very much for being here, and I will see you next week. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments. All right, thank you, and keep writing.